Hi guys, welcome to the Hack on the Hill 13 Intro to AI workshop. Today we're going to be learning about what AI is, so how it works behind the scenes. And then in the second part of this workshop, we're going to be talking about how to use AI in your own project. So we're going to be doing a cool demo for that, so make sure you stay. And yeah, let's get started with part one. What is AI? So artificial intelligence models are trained on very large data sets to learn patterns and use them to make predictions. So this may sound a little weird because you can just go to ChatGPT and go have a conversation with it, right? But let's try to understand this better by using an example that differentiates between algorithms, humans, and artificial intelligence. So when you think about an algorithm, let's think about a pasta recipe, right? So it's going to be split into steps. So step one, boil your water. Step two, add pasta into the boiling water. And step three will be, make your sauce, add some cheese, stuff like that. And you'll notice that it's just the same thing over and over. This recipe is not going to change. It's not dynamic. It has the same input, the same fixed rules and steps, and you're going to get the same output as well, pasta. So let's think about this with humans making pasta. So a human making pasta, they'll think to themselves, oh, I should probably boil some water. And then they'll remember that the last time they made pasta, it had no flavor. And you can taste the sauce while you're making it and it'll have no flavor. So you can add salt, you can add different seasonings, stuff like that, etc., etc. So you'll notice that it has no fixed rules and that humans can adapt based on memory, senses, and judgment. So it's much different than an algorithm because it's dynamic, it's changing, and is based on understanding of what you're making and past experiences and stuff like that. So let's think about how an AI would make pasta. So when an AI makes pasta, it can't taste the food. It can't, physically put salt into the sauce, and it can't recall memories like humans do. But it's seen millions of recipes because remember, it's trained on very large data sets. And it learns that add salt often appears when flavor is lacking. So it's going to choose the most likely next step in that scenario, which would be add salt if we have no flavor. And so basically what I'm trying to teach you is AI is not going to understand cooking, but it'll predict the patterns. So a human will understand cooking and make changes based on that. An algorithm will just be the same recipe over and over, the same rules, same output, same input, stuff like that. And then an AI will somewhat function similarly to a human, but instead it's because it has that very large training data set that it learned these patterns from. So I'll talk a little more about that soon. But first, let's think back to, talking to ChatGPT and just having a conversation with it. How can it understand and generate text? Well, it does this by predicting the next small piece of text over and over. So that brings me to tokens. AI doesn't read text like humans. They don't see words, they see tokens. So you see this phrase right here, hack on the hill. It's split up into 5 different tokens, even though it's 4 words, right? So the first token is hack, then the next token is space on, space the, space hill, exclamation point. So 5 tokens for 17 characters. Everything that you give to AI is converted into tokens. That includes text, that includes code, that includes images. Everything is tokenized, right? And 100 tokens kind of translates to around 75 English words. So when you think about the phrase, the sky is, you're going to think blue. Everyone knows that. But an AI that's going to be trained on all these data sets is going to learn it's going to predict that the next word in the pattern, the sky is, the next token will be blue. And that's because it's trained on those data sets and learned that pattern. It's kind of similar to how we learned that the sky is blue by looking at it and, kind of hearing that phrase. But that's just how AI does it with tokens. That leads me to the context window. So a context window is the maximum number of tokens that a model can see at once. So think about a whiteboard and you're kind of drawing on the whiteboard, you're doing some studying, right? If you fill up the whiteboard and you have something new that you need to write down, you're most likely going to erase the oldest thing and you're going to make new room for it and write the new thing down. So that's kind of how the context window works. So if you're talking to ChatGPT, you have this super long, insightful conversation or a really long conversation about some code. It's going to start forgetting the stuff that you said at the beginning, and kind of give you some foggy responses that don't really remember exactly what you talked about at the beginning. So the tokens over here, I'm assuming you can see my mouse. The context window of some popular models, so 2 million, 2 million, 1 million, 400,000. Yeah. So the context window right here is a conversation that I'm having with ChatGPT. All tokens are taken into account for the context window. That includes input, output, and the past conversation. So let's go through this together. You see at the start, I say hi ChatGPT. That should be 3 tokens, I think, for hi space chat, then GPT. And then it'll say, hi, how can I help you today? And then I'm going to say, was your message, hi, oh, that's a typo. How can I help you today? Added to your context window as tokens. And it'll say yes. So when I send that prompt, was your message, blah, 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 it takes that as tokens as well as the 2 previous messages, hi ChatGPT and hi, how can I help you today, to make this response right here. So the entire conversation is tokenized and included into the active context window for this conversation. So now that we know how AI works under the hood in a general sense, we're going to start using AI in our projects. So before we start, I want to give you guys some free offers. You can find these links also at the README in the bottom left if you just type that into your browser. You can get 1 year of free Gemini 3 Pro and more, so some Google benefits if you're a student, which is a pretty good deal. I still have mine. Cursor, you can get 1 year of free Cursor Pro if you're a student. And then there's also the Claude Builder Club at UCLA. If you attend their meetings, you get free Claude Pro and free API credits, which I think is pretty awesome. And then there's a lot of other student offers like GitHub Education, Notion, Canva, Perplexity, a lot of student offers. So I recommend you check it out. So let's start by learning how to use AI as your teammate with ideation. So you had the hackathon and you just got your guidelines for what your project should be like. And you can use AI to help you brainstorm. So you can talk to ChatGPT to get some project ideas, or Gemini to get some project ideas, name ideas, feature ideas, and making prompts for other AIs as well. And you can also help with design ideas. So logos, UI components, and landing page text are just some examples. And then I'm going to go through how prompting AI can really change depending on how much context you give it. So I want you guys to notice the difference in output quality between these two. So give me some hackathon ideas. I'll just say that right now. Give me some hackathon ideas. I'm going to wait a little bit. Here are some hackathon ready projects. So you'll see that it says you'll have a working MVP within 24 to 48 hours. It gives you some very general ideas like AI/machine learning driven ideas. What it does, records meetings and auto generates action items, resume job fit analyzer, hallucination detector, just some very vague ideas, right? And there's no structure to it, honestly. It doesn't it's not exactly what I want, because what if the hackathon is not 24 hours? What if it's 12? What if it's, even more? So let's just go ahead. I'm going to copy paste this here, and we're going to see how this one looks. So give me some hackathon ideas that can be built in 24 hours for UCLA students that is focused on sustainability. Give me a potential name, tech stack, and features. I'm in a team of 3, and we are all beginners. So you'll see already, it took this into account and then gave me some ideas. Brew and Green Tracker, a simple web app that helps students track eco-friendly habits. Okay, that's cool. Why it's good for beginners. Tech stack, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Firebase hosting, login. See, this is all pretty simple stuff. This is what I asked for, right? So what you ask for really matters. You can't really just say, make me the best app ever. You kind of need to give it some constraints and really like voice what you want, right? Because AI isn't magic. It's constrained by how good your prompt is. So let's dive into using AI as your teammate with debugging. So let's say this is my first time ever writing a line of code with Python. And I make the variable world. It's a string, hello world. And then I'm making a function called hello. It's going to take in a word as a parameter, and then it's going to print that word. So I call the function hello with my variable world, and hypothetically, this should print hello world. So I run it, and I get a syntax error at line 2. What? I've never used Python. This makes no sense to me. Let's ask an AI for help. So here's what I could do. I could copy and paste the code and the error to ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok or Claude, or I can take a screenshot of the code and the error and send it to the AI, or I can use an agent, which I'll talk more about later. And you'll see there's a syntax error here. The problem was we used function instead of def to define a function, and this will now print hello world. Sweet. Okay, awesome. So now let's talk about using LLM APIs in your project. So up until now, all we've really done is prompt ChatGPT and just get like a text response, right? So now what if we want to use that AI model in our project to make decisions or give us some output whenever we want? So I'm going to teach you guys how to use Google AI Studio and the Gemini API, and we're going to be generating a pasta recipe with the Gemini API, and we're not ever going to go talk to Gemini like how you normally would, right? So before we start, make sure you have all these things. So you have to have an IDE or an integrated development environment. So Visual Studio Code or Cursor are two very big ones. And you have to make sure that Python is installed. So check in your terminal, which I'll show you guys right now how you would do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and type Python 3 -- version. And it'll return what version of Python I have. And if this doesn't show up, I think, this works for Windows users, and then Python 3 is more so for Mac. But if it doesn't show up, like command not found Python or Python 3, then go ahead and download Python right here. And you have to make sure that you have 3.9 or higher. If you do not, I recommend you still go to this link and download the newest version. So for the first step, you're going to open your IDE. I'm going to be using VS Code for this demonstration, and you have to make sure that your terminal is open. So you see this button right here. It should look similar in Cursor as well. You're just going to click that, and it's going to open your terminal. So right here, and then we're going to make the project folder. So there's multiple ways that you can do this. You can just do like, you can just click right here to make a new folder and just call it hack demo. Or if you want, I'm going to delete this because I already have a hack demo. You can go ahead and do make dir hack demo, and then you'll see it'll do the same thing. It shows up right here. Then we'll cd into it, hack demo 2, and now we're in hack demo 2. So what we're going to do now that we have made that directory or folder and went into it, we're going to go ahead and make a Python file and a .env file. So let's go ahead and do that right now. You could just click new file right here, name it .env. I already have one that exists. And click it again, do main.py. I already have one that exists. So you can also do it with these commands, touch.env and touch main.py. You would do those on separate lines, but I'm not going to do that because I already have the files. So once you have those two files, you should see these two right here in your Explorer if you're using VS Code, and it should look similar in Cursor as well. So now for step 4, we're going to go ahead and install these dependencies. So run this command in your terminal, pip install dash uppercase U, Google dash GenAI, Python dash .env, and then you're going to go to this link right here, https://aistudio.google.com/API keys, and you're just going to go ahead and click create API key, create a project. If you don't see one in here, you can name it whatever you want, and then click create key, and it should generate something that looks like this. Make sure that you're on the free tier because I don't want you guys spending money for this demonstration. Then you're going to click right here on your key. I'm not going to click mine because you're not supposed to share your API keys. Don't forget that, okay? So you're going to click that, you're going to copy it, okay? So keep that in your clipboard. Now, yeah, you can see, don't ever share it. Now, step 5, we're going to add the API key to our .env, and we're going to make the Python script. So this is what your .env should look like. One line, uppercase Gemini _ API _ key equals, and then you're going to paste right after the equals what your Gemini API key is. Then make sure you save your changes. You can do that with Command S or Control S on Windows. And then you're going to write this code into your main.py. So if you can't read that, it's also on the README down here in the bottom left. But I'll just read it really quickly. From .env import load.env. That's the dependency that we just installed earlier. And that will basically load our API key from our .env file. Then from Google import GenAI. So it's going to use the generative AI model. Then the client will read the Gemini API key from our environment, and then we'll create a response that uses this model, Gemini 3 Flash Preview, which is the free one, and then give me a simple pasta recipe for beginners, keep it under 8 steps. So that's what our prompt will be essentially, but in code, right? And then we'll print the response. So I'm going to go ahead and run it right now for you guys. I'm just going to run python3 main.py. That's how you run it. So step 3, run python3 main.py in your terminal to see your output. Let's try it out. Let's see what I get. It may take a little bit, so don't worry about that. But, okay. So I just got instructions for a classic garlic and Parmesan pasta. And yeah, so I didn't necessarily ask for any specifics, so this is a great response. And you'll see in the slideshow here, they gave me a garlic butter Parmesan pasta. And it's actually looks a lot smaller instructions than the one I just made. So this is just a very simple use case, but just think about the possibilities of adding a more specific prompt like we talked about earlier, or getting user input, or returning something other than just a text response. So I recommend checking out the Gemini API documentation. There's also an OpenAI API. There's APIs for all the big LLMs. So I recommend checking out the documentation so you can really level up your game with LLM APIs. So yeah, this is pretty exciting stuff. You can use it in your project. You can just use the power of AI. So let's talk about what agentic development is. So what we just did with the Gemini API and what we've kind of been doing this whole time is just sending a prompt to an LLM and getting a response. Everything that we've done so far has just been text input, text response. So what agentic development is that we actually give the AI tools and allow it to have this kind of loop here. So the loop is we're going to give it a goal. It's going to think, act, observe, and then repeat until the goal is finished. So it'll kind of think about what it has to do. It'll use the tools to act. Maybe it'll make a file. Maybe it'll write some code for you. And then it'll observe what it just did and the changes that it made. And then it'll repeat until the goal is finished. So here's the first example of agentic development. This is Cursor. It's a fork of VS Code. So it's also an IDE. You might have heard me mentioning it earlier. It has AI baked into the interface. So it uses MCP, or Model Context Protocol, which is essentially just tools for the AI to transition from a passive code assistant to an autonomous agent. So I'm actually going to show you guys the power of agentic development right here. So you'll see I just opened it, completely empty. There's nothing here, no files. So I'm just going to say, can you make a file called .env so I can put my Gemini API key in there and then use Python loadenv and a script called main.py that loads the Gemini API key and uses it to print a pasta recipe in my terminal. Okay, let's try this. Allow to search the web. Awesome. As you can see, it just made this .env file and it made oh, sweet. It made me a script that basically looks exactly like what we had. So as you can see, Cursor made those files and edited them just for us, which is pretty cool because I didn't write a single line of code. I didn't even click the new file button and it just made it all for me just from a prompt. So you can imagine how strong that can be in your projects. Let's look at another example of agentic development. This is Claude Code, which is a CLI-based agent. I can actually go ahead and open it right here in VS Code. So if I just make another terminal and I just use the keyword Claude, then there we go. I have Claude Code and I can just talk to it and it can do exactly what Cursor does. It can make files, it can edit files, it can read files. It's a very powerful tool. So I recommend you guys check out both of them. I personally use Claude Code the most because it has very strong deep reasoning and it works well with large code bases because you have very customizable context manipulation. So let's actually get more into that. So if you guys remember the context window, everything that you put, every input and every output that the model gives you counts as tokens towards the context window. So code, input, output, the entire conversation that you've had, tools that it uses, all is counted towards the context window. So this introduces context engineering. So context engineering is intentionally shaping what the model sees. So think about how we gave a very specific prompt to get a better output. Now let's think about what files should the model be looking at when we have a really large code base, hundreds of files. It can't fit all 2,000 files that, a small Google team has. So basically what context engineering is figuring out what's the most relevant context, what is the most important part of our chat history that it should always remember. So like Claude Code I previously talked about has very good context management capabilities. So you can give it persistent instructions that no matter how much context is used will always remember it. You can tell it which files to look at. You can kind of keep the scope known to the agent so that it doesn't waste any context and waste any tokens. By having good context engineering, your agent can have better coherence. It can have fewer hallucinations, which is basically just bad output, not exactly what you asked for. And it can have more relevant reasoning and faster iteration. So having good context engineering is very important to ensure the quality of your agent's output. It's very similar to how giving specific prompts can help give you what you want, but this time it's at a much larger scale because we're talking about large code bases and iteratively working on projects. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. I recommend you check out the agents. I recommend you look at the API documentation, and I hope that this was interesting to you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck at Hoth, and yeah, have fun. Thank you.